Hello, lovely. The last time we saw each other, I was in a not so great headspace. I felt like the weight of the world was kind of on my shoulders in that moment, and I just need to let it out. Yeah, this is my very real, very honest journey, and sometimes it's going to be not so glamorous. But I do have a few updates, some changes, and an announcement that I'm going to make here in a little bit. But first, I wanted to talk about what I discussed with my doctor. Obviously, this last cycle failed. We got the blood work, that everything did come back as negative. I talked to Roma, which is one of the other physicians in the clinic, and she was letting me know that based on the symptoms that I'm having, the sensitivity that I have, and these failed inseminations now, there's been 2 back-to-back fails. She is thinking that there's something else going on, something like endometriosis. So that's something that cannot be diagnosed without surgery, and she doesn't think it's necessary to do the surgery. She said that sometimes it can do more harm than good, because basically the surgery is just to diagnose. If I already kind of have symptoms and thinking that that might be a possibility, she feels comfortable with just kind of giving that tentative prognosis and not doing a surgery to confirm it. Her treatment plan for me at this point wouldn't change either way if I am confirmed to be diagnosed with endometriosis, so she doesn't think surgery is going to be necessary for me. I also asked about a hysteroscopy because that is something that a previous specialist had mentioned before that might be necessary for me. That's another surgery that she's saying isn't necessary, and she was also saying with that kind of surgery it can again create scar tissue and it can kind of create its own issues, so she's not recommending that for me either. Her recommendation at this point, given everything that they know and everything that's been done already, she recommends moving on to IVF. She's willing to do that one last round with me if we want to. That's something that Manny and I have kind of been talking about. We're kind of going back and forth about, but then we also were talking about IVF. IVF is something that I have not wanted to do. I have truly been putting it off for as long as I can because there is just so much that goes into IVF. It's scary. It's a scary process. From beginning to end, it is scary, okay? I can't put it to you any other way. It makes me nervous, and I think that whenever I first was going to start IVF back in 2022, I had literally just gotten on birth control and we were just gearing up to like start the whole process. I feel like I was a bit naive to the whole process, and so I felt like just this sense of excitement rather than this sense of nervousness, where now it's been 2 more years and I've done an extensive amount of research into IVF, and not only that, but like the drugs that go into IVF, you know, everything that goes into IVF, this whole medical process that's going to entail. I've done a lot of research on it, and I've had a lot more medical experience than the last 2 years. So it is something that makes me extremely nervous. I can't put it to you any other way. It is just something that makes me nervous. I am the daughter of a king, and I was not made with the spirit of fear. So I am claiming victory over that fear in the name of Jesus. And I'm claiming that boldness and bravery from my Father because I am a child of His. And we have decided to pursue IVF as our potential next steps. I haven't told anybody yet. We are just now in the very, very beginning stages of this, and before you can move forward with any kind of like formal treatment with the IVF process, you have to have a consultation, and that's where they go over any kind of questions that you have. They go over what your timeline is going to basically be. They just kind of go over everything, and that is scheduled for 2 weeks from now. And I'm excited. I'm excited, and I'm also extremely nervous. But again, I am holding steady with my faith, and I feel like God has kind of lined everything up. I've felt this way even with the IUIs, the process. One of my biggest concerns with IVF on the not physical side or emotional side, but the financial aspect of IVF is that it is extremely expensive. And that has definitely been something that has held Manny and I back in the past from moving forward with it, because we just don't have that kind of money to just pour into a medical treatment that might not be successful. But by the grace of God, and literally everything happens for a reason. Everything, every single thing happens for a reason. Because Tristan broke his wrist in February, our family deductible was hit. And because all of the medical procedures that I've already had this past year, I can basically go through IVF at the same expense that it would cost to do another IUI. That's God. Like, that is God. I can't give anything else an explanation of it, just that is God. I can't describe it as anything else, but that's God. That is God. And I have been praying about this journey, over my mental health, over my physical well-being, just like I have been praying. Like, I have been praying, like on my knees praying about this process. And to have one of my biggest concerns basically like, oh yeah, no, don't worry, it's taken care of. We're good. Like, what? What? So that in itself is the biggest blessing ever. Like, ever. Again, we don't have a consultation until 2 weeks from now, but this is based on Maven's contract with my clinic and my personal amounts and my personal rates and what they're seeing reflected as my insurance carrier, just like all of the stuff behind the scenes. That's what they're telling me. Now, this could be wrong. There could be some underlying fees that they're not aware of. I mean, this definitely could be wrong. Again, keeping myself cautiously optimistic for that, because I mean, that is just like a huge thing. And I don't want to be like let down so terribly if it ends up being that that's not the case. But for right now, that isn't something that's like holding me back from doing this process. I will say one of the other things, and the most daunting thing for me, other than the finances, are the extensive medical procedures that come along with this process. In most cases, it's 3 shots a day for at least 8 days. Then there's a egg retrieval, which is where they take this giant needle and they go in, shove it through, collect all the eggs, go back out, shove it through the other side, collect all the eggs. You're under anesthesia for that. So I've heard that women generally recover really well from that. But there's that. And then you hope to collect enough eggs to get enough M babies, is what they're called, embryos. Hopefully the ones that go off for genetic testing come back as normal, and then hopefully you have enough to try a transfer. But again, this is all kind of chance, and that is God again, because you never know how many follicles are going to develop, you never know how many eggs are going to develop, you never know how many embryos are actually going to be viable, you don't know how many embryos are going to have, you know, genetic deformities. I mean, everything is like perfectly calculated and perfectly measured. I've seen women who do, you know, they have to do like 8 egg retrievals because they don't get enough, or because the eggs that they do get and the embryos they create don't make it to testing, or if they do make it to testing, they're tested and they're not viable pregnancies. Like there's just so many variables that can happen. So I'm trying to curb my expectations with that, because IVF does not equal a baby. And I think that's a very important message to remind myself too, and like others, because I know once I start talking about this, it's just going to be this worked up thing that honestly might not even happen. And I feel like this second round of IUI, where I felt so confident that we did the trigger at the perfect time, we did the IUI at the perfect time, you know, the IUI was so extremely painful, like, oh, this is exactly what it needed to feel like to make sure we're in the right place. Like all the symptoms I was feeling, I mean, every single thing that led up to that IUI. And of course, during that 2-week wait, you know, I'm telling family members, you know, this is what we're thinking, you know, we haven't gotten any testing done, but you know, we're in our 2-week wait, we might be pregnant, we can't drink, you know. And then for it not to have happened again, it really, really, really broke me. So I'm just trying to be aware of that going into this process. Again, the consultation is for 2 weeks, so Manny and I are discussing it almost on a daily basis, how we feel about it, my nervousness about it, you know, his anticipation for it. I mean, it just is something that we're not going in just willy-nilly. We're not, I don't know, just throwing caution to the wind and just going for it. I mean, this is something that we are strategically and methodically like working through. I hope that you will stick around for this exciting new journey. I am cautiously optimistic. If you haven't seen my IUI diaries, I highly recommend going back and looking at that journey because you will get a better understanding of what this IVF process is going to mean for me and look like for me, i.e. the trigger shots. That's kind of what I'm hinting at, because from my understanding, I'll be doing quite a bit of shots, and there are some shots after transfer. They're called progesterone in oil shots or PIO shots, and those go in your butt, and the needle is like that long, like no joke, that long, because it's an intramuscular shot. So I don't know how I'm gonna do all this, but I'm gonna take one step at a time. I'm gonna use God as my guide, let him guide my steps, my thoughts in this process, and I gotta give it to him. So I hope you will stick with me. Thank you so much for being here. I love you so much. Thank you so much again for the support, and I hope to see you next time. Bye.